USA, Bloomberg's Matthew Dowd has traveled to Norfolk, Virginia, a region that is vulnerable to sequestration because of its dependence on the defense dollar. Joining me now to tell us more about the fiscal cliff's Main Street impact is Bloomberg political analyst Matthew Dowd, and from Capitol Hill, the gentleman who represents the district, Democratic Congressman Bobby Scott. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. First question to you, Congressman Scott. If you're going to give a percentage, if you can, will we have a deal on the fiscal cliff? What are the odds?
I would say about 50-50. It depends on whether or not people are willing to get specific about what they're talking about. Part of the problem now is that you have people talking about reducing the size of government with unspecified cuts, or revenue is on the table without a clue as to what that means. You can't even begin to compromise until you can put some specifics on the table. We're talking about extending tax cuts. We have to be specific about how they're going to be paid for. There are a lot of proposals that I think people would decide to give up the tax cuts if they have to pay for it the way some of the proposals are being made.
Congressman, you know, I spent a lot of time down there talking to business owners and defense contractors and just regular folks, and the big word they keep bringing up is certainty and predictability, and they seem to fault both political parties. What they keep saying is give us some certainty or give us some predictability that we can count on for the next 3 or 5 years so we can make our business decisions. Do you think both sides of the aisle are at fault in some of this lack of giving business and people that level of certainty?
Well, I think the people suggesting that there's a lack of certainty are the same ones that caused the uncertainty to begin with. It wasn't the Democrats' idea to come up with this sequester idea where people don't know what the economy of Hampton Roads is going to look like. Estimates have been made that the Hampton Roads, Virginia, the Southeast Virginia economy, almost 50% of it is based on spending by the Department of Defense. When you have a major cut in the sequester hanging over people's heads, of course there's going to be uncertainty. So the people that came up with this sequester idea ought to answer about the certainty. We had the tax cuts expiring, all of the tax cuts expiring. That was certain. People come in and say, well, let's extend them. So there's uncertainty, and then they complain about the uncertainty. I think we need to just come up with specifics, move forward, and settle this thing. And on the sequester, there's no need for the sequester at all. If the tax cuts expire, if we go over the cliff, for example, the tax cuts will expire. There'll be plenty of money on the table to offset the need for the sequester. So this sequester really doesn't need to be hanging over people's heads at all.
Congressman Scott, you've earned your stripes in the Congress for more than 2 decades of service. What's different now than when you first came to Congress in the ability of both parties to wrangle over disagreements?
Well, the problem now is that we don't even make progress towards a solution. People take their positions. When I first got here, you take your positions, but then one side would win, one side would lose, and you have a conclusion. Now you just have a stalemate where people don't even come up with specifics enough to begin a compromise. Reduce the size of government with unspecified cuts. How do you compromise with that? Even extend the tax cuts, but not be specific about how they're going to be paid for, I think doesn't give you much to work with. We need to have people come up with specific proposals. If you're going to extend the tax cuts, make the list of how you're going to pay for it. The problem with making the list is that when you start getting specific, it will be so unpopular that I think most people would say just forget about the tax cuts altogether, let them expire, rather than cut Medicare and Social Security and all of the other things in government that you would have to cut in order to afford to extend any of the tax cuts. And so that's what we need. We need to get specific, and when you get specific, you can compromise. Well, rather than cut this, cut that, but at least you've got something to talk about. People are not beginning to be specific. And I think when people know that we're talking about cutting Medicare as a way to extend even the so-called middle-class tax cuts, I think people are going to start thinking again about the necessity or even desirability of extending any of the tax cuts. We need to know how they're going to be paid for.
I want to thank you very much, Representative Bobby Scott, Democrat of Virginia. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to have more with Matt